The wife who refused to be owned. When your husband interrupts your date with another man, things are about to get complicated. But before we dive into whether Amara Kingsley chooses love or power, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what you would choose in her position. And subscribe because this story gets absolutely wild. Amara sat across from a man who wasn't her husband, candlelight flickering between them like a secret. His name was Daniel, and he made her laugh. Something she hadn't done in 3 years. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversations, expensive wine, the kind of atmosphere where people came to forget their problems or create new ones. Then the door opened. Di-hoon Park walked in like he owned the place. Maybe he did. She'd stopped keeping track of which businesses bore his family's fingerprints. Every head in the room turned, not because they recognized him, but because some people carry danger the way others carry cologne. It announces itself before they speak. His eyes found hers immediately, dark, cold, furious. Daniel was mid-sentence, something about his work in finance, when Di-hoon reached their table. "We're leaving," he said, not to Daniel, to her, like the other man didn't exist at all. Amara took a slow sip of her wine. "I'm in the middle of dinner." Now, the single word carried the weight of 3 years of silence, 3 years of sleeping in separate rooms, 3 years of being Mrs. Park in name only. She set down her glass with deliberate care. Around them, the restaurant had gone quiet. People pretended not to watch while watching everything. Daniel looked between them, confusion giving way to something like fear as he registered the tension, the implied threat, the way Di-hoon's hands stayed loose at his sides in a way that suggested coiled violence. "Who is this?" Daniel managed. "Her husband," Di-hoon answered, still not looking at him, still focused entirely on Amara like she was the only person in the room, in the city, in the world. The thing was, he'd never looked at her like this before, not once in their entire marriage. 3 years earlier, Amara Kingsley had walked down an aisle toward a stranger. The wedding was beautiful. Her father had spared no expense. The Park family had spared no expense. Everything about it screamed money, power, alliance. Nothing about it whispered love. Di-hoon had stood at the altar in a black suit that probably cost more than her car. Handsome in that sharp, cold way that made you think of expensive knives. When he'd lifted her veil, his expression had been perfectly blank. A business transaction. Sign here, initial there. You may now merge your family's shipping empire with our criminal syndicate. Her father had explained it simply. They needed protection. The Kingsley name meant something in legitimate business, but when you operated at their level, you brushed against people who didn't care about legitimacy. The Park family offered an umbrella. Di-hoon needed respectability, access to legal channels, a wife who could smile at charity galas and make his empire look clean. "You'll be safe," her father had promised. "The Parks protect what's theirs." What he hadn't mentioned was that protection came with a price. Isolation, neglect, a husband who treated her like a porcelain doll, valuable, fragile, locked away where she couldn't break or be broken. Their wedding night, Di-hoon had shown her to her room, not their room, hers. "You'll have everything you need," he'd said. "Credit cards, security, staff, anything you want." Everything except him. Months passed, then a year. Amara lived in a penthouse that felt like a gilded cage, married to a ghost who came home late and left early, who sometimes didn't come home at all. They attended events together, his hand on her lower back, her smile bright and empty, playing their roles perfectly. Then they'd get in the car, and the silence would swallow them whole. She tried at first, tried to talk to him, to break through that wall of ice. "How was your day?" she'd ask over breakfast when their paths occasionally crossed. "Fine," never looking up from his phone. "I was thinking we could have dinner together sometime. Actually sit down and—" "I'm busy." After a while, she stopped trying, started building her own life in the margins he'd left her. Charity work, art classes, friendships with other women who understood what it meant to be ornamental. She learned to sleep alone, to eat alone, to exist in a marriage that was really just expensive loneliness. But loneliness has a way of making you brave, or reckless. Maybe they're the same thing. Daniel had been kind, attentive. He'd asked about her thoughts, her interests, actually listened when she spoke. So when he'd suggested dinner, she'd said yes. Not because she wanted to hurt Di-hoon, you can't hurt someone who doesn't care, but because she wanted to feel like a person again instead of a possession. Now Di-hoon stood beside her table, and the mask he'd worn for 3 years had cracked completely. "Get up," he said again. Amara stood, but not because he'd told her to, because everyone was staring and she'd been raised not to make scenes. She turned to Daniel, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "I'm sorry, I have to go." Di-hoon's hand closed around her upper arm, not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to make ownership clear. He guided her through the restaurant, past the maitre d', into the cold night air where a black car waited, because of course it did. The driver opened the door. Di-hoon gestured for her to get in. When she hesitated, he leaned close, his voice low and dangerous. "Don't make this worse." "Worse than what?" The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "Worse than 3 years of you pretending I don't exist." Something flickered across his face, too fast to name. He was good at that, burying emotions before they could surface. Years of practice, probably. You didn't become heir to a criminal empire by wearing your heart on your sleeve. She got in the car. He slid in beside her, and the door closed with a heavy, final sound. They didn't speak. The city slid past the windows, lights and shadows, people living their normal lives, unaware that a woman's world was cracking open just feet away from them. Amara stared straight ahead, her heart hammering against her ribs, anger and confusion and something else, something she didn't want to examine too closely. Di-hoon's jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. His hands were fists on his thighs. When they hit a red light, he finally spoke. "What were you thinking?" The question was so absurd, she almost laughed. "I was thinking I'd like to have dinner with someone who actually wants to talk to me." He could have been anyone, dangerous, a plant from a rival family. "He's an accountant." "You don't know that. And you don't care." She turned to face him fully now, 3 years of swallowed words rising up her throat like bile. "Let's not pretend this is about my safety. You've ignored me for our entire marriage. I could have dinner with the devil himself, and you wouldn't notice unless someone took a photo." The light turned green. They accelerated, the engine's purr filling the silence between them. "I notice everything about you," Di-hoon said quietly. "Wait, before we go further, if you're hooked on this story, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Amara stared at him, trying to process what he'd just said, the way he'd said it, rough and raw, like it had been dragged out of him against his will. "What?" Di-hoon's eyes stayed fixed forward. "Every morning you have coffee at 7 a.m., 2 sugars, cream. You take your breakfast on the balcony when the weather's good. You volunteer at the Children's Hospital on Tuesdays and Thursdays. You read before bed, mystery novels mostly. You fall asleep with the lamp on more often than not." Each detail landed like a stone in still water. How did he know these things? He was never there. He was always. "The security reports," she realized. Among other things, his throat worked as he swallowed. "You wore a blue dress to the Hamilton charity gala. It had a low back. You laughed at something Mrs. Hamilton said, and I couldn't hear what it was from across the room, but I wanted to. You bit your lower lip during the auction when the bidding got high on that painting you liked. I bid on it afterward. It's in storage." Amara's breath caught. "Why?" "Because you wanted it." "No," she shook her head, anger flaring hot and bright. "Why do you know all of this? Why do you pay attention to every single thing I do and then act like I'm invisible?" The car pulled up to their building. Di-hoon didn't move to get out, neither did the driver, who'd clearly been through this before. The waiting, the silence, the understanding that some conversations needed to finish. "Because paying attention is all I can afford to do," Di-hoon said finally. His voice was different now, stripped. "If I do more than that, you become a target." "I'm already a target. I became one the day I married you." "Not like this." He turned to face her, and she saw something she'd never seen before in his eyes. Fear. Your peripheral right now, the wife, decoration. If anyone knew that you were more than that, they'd use you to destroy me. The confessions settled between them, heavy and complicated. Amara tried to sort through it, to understand what he was actually saying. So you've been ignoring me to protect me? Yes. For 3 years. Yes. Without asking if that's what I wanted. His jaw tightened again. What you want doesn't change what they do to you. What I want, she said slowly, clearly, is to not be treated like a chess piece that everyone moves around the board without asking. Not by my father, not by your family, and definitely not by you. She reached for the door handle. Di-hoon's hand shot out, catching her wrist, not rough but desperate. Amara. Let go. Please. The word stopped her. She couldn't remember him ever saying please before. Couldn't remember his voice ever sounding like this, like something inside him was breaking. What do you want from me? She asked. Another chance. The words came out rough, uncertain, like he wasn't used to asking for things, only taking them. Let me do this right. Let me be your husband the way I should have been from the beginning. You had 3 years to be my husband. I was afraid. The admission hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Di-hoon Park, the man who walked into rooms and made hardened criminals nervous, was afraid. Of what? Her. Afraid of what? She whispered. Of this. His grip on her wrist softened, his thumb brushing across her pulse point. Of wanting you so badly that it becomes the weapon someone uses to kill us both. My father told me when I was young that love is the fastest way to lose everything, that in our world, attachment is weakness. So I kept my distance. I thought if I didn't let myself feel anything, you'd be safe. How'd that work out? A bitter smile ghosted across his lips. Saw you with another man tonight and almost committed murder in a 5-star restaurant, so not well. Despite everything, the anger, the hurt, the 3 years of loneliness, something in Amara's chest twisted at the honesty in his voice. This was the man she'd imagined might exist beneath the ice, the one she'd waited for, the one she'd given up on. I can't go back to the way things were, she said. I won't. I know. If we do this, if we try, you have to actually try, not just decide what's best for me and execute the plan without my input. We are partners or we are nothing. Partners, he repeated, like he was testing the word, learning its shape. I can do that. Can you? She pulled her wrist free, not because she wanted to, but because she needed him to understand. Because partnering with someone means trusting them, talking to them, letting them in even when it's dangerous, even when it scares you. I'll learn. You'll have to do more than learn. You'll have to change. Something shifted in his expression, determination replacing the vulnerability. Then I'll change, whatever it takes. They sat in the car, the engine still running, the building's doorman pretending very hard not to notice that his employers were having what appeared to be a marriage-defining conversation in the backseat. Amara wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to, but wanting something didn't make it real. 3 years of evidence suggested that Di-hoon Park was exactly who he'd always been, a man who loved control more than he could ever love anything else. I need time, she said. How much time? I don't know, more than one conversation in a car. He nodded slowly, like he'd expected this, but hoped for something different. Will you have dinner with me tomorrow night, just us? So you can tell me everything you've noticed about my daily routine. So I can ask you questions and listen to the answers and try to be the husband you deserved 3 years ago. The sincerity in his voice nearly undid her. Amara looked at this man, her husband, her stranger, and tried to imagine what tomorrow might look like. Could people really change? Could ice thaw after 3 years of winter? One dinner, she said. We'll see how it goes. Relief washed across his face, so stark and genuine that it made her chest ache. One dinner, he agreed. They went inside. The elevator ride was silent but different now. charged with something that hadn't been there before. Possibility, maybe, or just the ghost of it. When they reached their floor, Amara turned toward her room. Her separate, lonely room that had been her entire world for 3 years. Amara, Di-hoon's voice stopped her. For what it's worth, I'm sorry for all of it. She looked back at him, this powerful man who suddenly seemed uncertain, almost vulnerable. Sorry doesn't erase 3 years. I know, he ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect styling, a crack in the armor, but it's a start. Maybe it was, or maybe it was just another performance, another way of keeping her in place while he maintained control. Amara was too tired to figure out which, too emotionally wrung out from a night that had started with harmless dinner and ended with her husband confessing fear and desire in the back of a car. She went to her room without another word. Sleep didn't come easy. How could it? Her mind kept replaying the conversation, Di-hoon's admissions, the look on his face when he'd said he noticed everything about her, the way his hand had felt on her wrist, possessive but somehow pleading. Around 2 a.m., she heard footsteps in the hallway. They paused outside her door, stood there for a long moment, then retreated. Morning came with coffee delivered to her room, 2 sugars, cream, and a note in handwriting she recognized from signed documents and business papers. Tonight, 7 p.m., I'll make reservations, DH. 7 words, but they felt like more. The day crawled past. Amara tried to distract herself with reading, with phone calls to friends, with anything that would keep her from overthinking what the evening might bring. She almost texted him a dozen times to cancel. The vulnerability of hope felt more dangerous than the safety of her loneliness. But at 6:30 p.m., she found herself getting ready. A dress, not the blue one he'd mentioned, but a black one that made her feel armored and elegant at once. Heels, minimal jewelry, war paint disguised as makeup. Di-hoon was waiting in the living room when she emerged. He'd changed too, into a dark suit that fit him like a weapon, but his tie was slightly crooked, and she realized with a jolt that he was nervous. Di-hoon Park, who faced down rival crime bosses without flinching, was nervous about dinner with his wife. "You look beautiful," he said. "Thank you." The words came out more formal than she'd intended, but she didn't know how else to be. 3 years of distance didn't evaporate overnight. The restaurant was small, intimate, not the kind of place where the Park family typically dined. No private rooms, no security checkpoints, just good food and quiet corners. They were shown to a table by the window, city lights spreading out below them like scattered diamonds. Di-hoon held her chair, ordered wine without asking what she wanted, then caught himself. "Unless you'd prefer something else." "The wine is fine." "I'm trying," he said quietly. "I know." The server appeared, took their orders, disappeared. Silence settled between them, but it was different than the silence in the car had been. Less charged, more uncertain, like they were both waiting for the other to make the first move. "Tell me about the hospital," Di-hoon said finally, "the volunteer work." Amara blinked. Of all the conversation starters she'd expected, that wasn't one. What about it? Why children? Why that hospital specifically? She studied him, looking for the trap, the ulterior motive, found nothing but genuine curiosity. "Because kids don't care who my husband is or what my last name means. They just want someone to read them stories or play games with them. It's the only place I feel like just Amara." He absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. "You're good with them. I saw photos from the charity event last month. The little boy in the wheelchair, you made him laugh. Marcus, he has a brain tumor. He probably won't make it to his next birthday." Her throat tightened at the memory. "But for 20 minutes, I got to make him forget about that." "That matters." "It's the only thing that does matter, sometimes." Their wine arrived. Di-hoon raised his glass, to starting over. Amara hesitated, then lifted hers, "To figuring out if we can." They drank. The wine was good, rich and complex, and probably absurdly expensive. Around them, other couples talked and laughed, living their normal lives, unaware that the man in the corner booth could have them killed with a phone call. The thought should have disturbed her. Maybe 3 years ago it would have, but she'd learned to live with the reality of who she'd married. The question was whether she could live with him. "Ask me something," Dihun said. "Anything. Why did you agree to marry me?" His fingers tightened on the stem of his wine glass. "Honestly. That's the only currency that works here." A beat of silence. Then, "Because I saw your photo and I wanted to meet the woman who looked that sad in a portrait that was supposed to be joyful. Your engagement photo. You were smiling, but your eyes were—" He stopped, searching for the word. "Resigned, like you'd already accepted defeat. I wanted to know what had put that look there." The confession caught her off guard. "That's why you married me, curiosity. That's why I agreed to the meeting. I married you because I sat across from you at that first dinner, watched you try to make conversation while clearly terrified, and realized you were brave in a way I'd never learned to be. You walked into a room with my father, with my entire family, and you didn't flinch. You smiled and asked questions and acted like marrying into a crime syndicate was a perfectly normal Tuesday afternoon. I was raised to be decorative. You're so much more than that." The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. "You just haven't been allowed to be." The food arrived, giving them both a moment to resettle. Amara pushed pasta around her plate, appetite gone. Everything felt too big, too fast, like they were trying to speedrun 3 years of marriage into one dinner. "What about you?" she asked. "Why the Park family? Why this life?" "I was born into it. My grandfather built the empire, my father expanded it, and I'll inherit it when he decides I'm ready, which might be never, considering he still treats me like I'm 12. You could walk away." Dihun's laugh was bitter. "No one walks away from this family. You leave in a body bag or not at all." "That's dramatic." "That's accurate." He met her eyes across the table. "This is the only life I've ever known, the only one I'm trained for. My father made sure of that. He culled every other option before I was old enough to understand what options were." There was pain in his voice, old pain buried deep. Amara found herself wanting to reach across the table to offer comfort, but she wasn't sure she had any to give. Her own wounds were too fresh, too raw. "What would you do," she asked, "if you could do anything?" The question clearly surprised him. "No one's ever asked me that." "I'm asking." He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant, thinking, actually thinking about a future that wasn't predetermined, something legitimate, maybe take over your father's shipping company, actually make it work with our family's connections, turn it into something that doesn't require anyone to die. "You've thought about this?" "Late at night, when I can't sleep." His eyes refocused on her, "Usually after I've stood outside your door trying to work up the courage to knock." The admission made her chest tight. "You should have knocked." "Would you have answered?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "Maybe, maybe not. You'd spent so long making me feel invisible that I don't know how I would have reacted to suddenly being seen." "I see you now." "Do you, or are you just afraid of losing something you've decided belongs to you?" The question landed hard. Dihun set down his fork, gave up the pretense of eating. "Both," he said. "I'm afraid of losing you, and I hate that I have no right to be afraid because I threw you away first. But I also see you, Amara. I see how you've built a life in the margins I left you, how you've been kind when you had every right to be bitter, how you still smile at my business partners even though they all know our marriage is a sham. You have grace I'll never have. Grace born of necessity. Grace nonetheless." Their server approached, sensed the heaviness at the table, and retreated without asking if they needed anything. Smart person. "What happens now?" Amara asked. "After this dinner, after the conversation, do we go back to separate rooms and try again tomorrow? Do we what? What does starting over even look like?" Dihun reached across the table, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers curled around hers. His hand was warm, calloused, the hand of a man who'd worked for everything he had, even if what he had was blood-stained. "It looks like this," he said. "Dinner, conversation, learning each other, and then maybe tomorrow we try breakfast together. And the day after that, we exist in the same room without it feeling like a business meeting. We build something, slow, intentional, real. And if it doesn't work? His grip tightened slightly. Then at least we tried. At least I stopped being a coward. Amara looked at their joined hands, at this man who'd been a stranger for 3 years, at the possibility that maybe, there was something worth saving here, or building, or discovering for the first time. Okay, she said softly. Okay. One day at a time, we try. The relief on his face was palpable. He brought her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles that sent heat racing up her arm. One day at a time, he agreed. They finished dinner talking about small things, books, movies, ridiculous things his father's associates had said at meetings. She told him about Marcus and the other kids at the hospital, about the time Mrs. Hamilton had gotten drunk at a charity auction and bid $30,000 on a portrait of her own dog. It was easy, surprisingly easy, like maybe underneath the ice and distance and fear, they'd actually been compatible all along. The check came. Di-hoon paid without looking at the total. They stood, and his hand found the small of her back as they walked out, not possessive this time, just present, connected. In the car, Amara found herself sitting closer to him than strictly necessary. Their thighs touched, his arm along the back of the seat, fingers occasionally brushing her shoulder, small intimacies that felt monumental after 3 years of careful distance. Thank you, she said, as the city slid past. For dinner. For trying, for being honest, for being scared and telling me anyway. He turned his head, studied her profile in the passing streetlights. Thank you for giving me the chance I don't deserve. They rode the elevator up in comfortable silence. At their floor, Amara expected him to retreat to his own room like always. Instead, he walked her to her door, his hand still on her back, presence solid and warm beside her. Breakfast tomorrow, he asked. What time? Whenever you wake up, I'll be there. She nodded, something warm and fragile unfurling in her chest. Hope maybe, or just the possibility of it. Good night, Di-hoon. Good night, Amara. He didn't move, neither did she. They stood in the hallway like teenagers after a first date, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Finally, Di-hoon leaned down, pressed a kiss to her forehead, chaste and sweet, and somehow more intimate than anything else that had happened between them. Then he stepped back, turned, walked to his own room. Amara went inside, closed the door, leaned against it. Her heart was racing. Her mind was chaos. Everything felt different and terrifying and shot through with something that might have been happiness if she dared name it. She was still standing there 10 minutes later when her phone buzzed with a text. I'm standing outside your door again. Still can't work up the courage to knock, but I'm trying. Sleep well. She opened the door, found him exactly where he said he'd be, phone in hand, looking surprised and vulnerable and cautiously hopeful. Come in, she said. His eyes widened. Amara. Just to talk, we're not. She stumbled over the words, feeling her cheeks heat. But maybe we could actually talk, without a table between us. Di-hoon stepped inside like he was entering sacred ground. Careful, reverent, terrified of breaking whatever fragile thing existed between them. Amara gestured to the sitting area by the window, a couch she'd spent countless nights on, reading or watching the city or trying not to feel the weight of her loneliness. They sat, not touching, but close. The lights of the city stretched out below them, millions of people living their lives. None of them aware that something was shifting in this penthouse. Tell me something true, Amara said, something you've never told anyone. Di-hoon was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, I dream about you, almost every night. We're somewhere else, sometimes it's a beach, sometimes it's a house I don't recognize. You're laughing, and I'm allowed to touch you, to hold you, to be close without fear. When I wake up, the loss of it feels like dying. The confession stole her breath. Di-hoon. Your turn, his voice was rough. Something true. She took a breath, let it out slowly. I used to hate you. In the beginning, I'd lie awake in this room and imagine what I'd say if you ever actually tried to have a conversation. all the ways I'd tell you how much you'd hurt me, but somewhere along the way, the hate turned into just sadness, grief for a marriage that never existed, for a husband I'd never know. And now I don't know what I feel. It's too big and too complicated, and it's only been one dinner. We have time, he said, if you'll give it to me. I want to, the admission felt dangerous, but I'm scared too. Of what? That you'll change your mind. That this, she gestured between them, is just a reaction to seeing me with someone else. That once you're sure I'm not going anywhere, you'll go back to the way things were. Di-hoon shifted on the couch, angling toward her. I won't. You don't know that. You're right, I don't. But I know that seeing you with him made me realize I've wasted 3 years being afraid of something that's going to happen whether I'm afraid or not. If someone wants to hurt me by hurting you, my distance won't stop them. It'll just mean I spent the time I had being a coward instead of being your husband. The logic was sound, painful but sound. Amara had spent 3 years as collateral damage for a fear that existed regardless of their emotional connection. She'd been punished for a crime she'd never committed, a weakness she'd never asked to be. I need you to understand something, she said carefully. If we do this, if we try to build something real, I need to be more than just your wife. I need purpose, agency, a role in your world that isn't just decorative. His brow furrowed. What are you saying? I'm saying I want in, the business, the decisions, the reality of what you do. She held up a hand before he could protest. I know it's dangerous. I know it's violent and ugly and nothing like the life I was raised for, but I'm already in it whether you acknowledge it or not. I'd rather be an active participant than a passive victim. Amara, that world is my world now, has been for 3 years. You just kept me locked out of the room where it happens. She leaned forward, met his eyes directly. I'm smart, I'm capable, I have skills you could use. My father's shipping empire has connections your family hasn't tapped. I speak 4 languages. I can read people. I'm wasted as arm candy. Di-hoon stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Actually seeing her, not as decoration or protection detail, but as a person, a partner. My father would never allow it, he said finally. Then we don't tell your father, not yet. Start small, let me sit in on meetings, give me access to the financial records, let me prove I can handle it before you make it official. It's dangerous. So is crossing the street, so is loving you. The words came out before she could stop them, and they hung in the air like a confession she hadn't meant to make. Di-hoon's breath caught. Amara. I didn't mean, she stood abruptly, needing distance, needing air. It's late, you should go. But he stood too, closing the space between them in 2 strides. His hands found her face, gentle and sure, tilting her head up until she had no choice but to meet his eyes. Say it again, he whispered. I can't. Please. Her heart was hammering against her ribs. I don't even know if it's true. It's been one dinner, one conversation. You can't love someone you don't know. But you could, if given the chance, if given time. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. I could too. I think I already do. I'm just afraid to call it that because the last time I admitted wanting something, my father took it away. What did you want? To be a doctor, to help people instead of hurting them. A bitter laugh. He made sure I understood that wasn't an option, made me watch an execution when I was 15, told me this was my inheritance, and I could embrace it or die refusing it. The horror of it settled in her chest. This man, this dangerous, complicated man, had been a boy once, a boy with dreams that had been beaten out of him until all that remained was the air, the weapon, the cold calculation that people like his father needed. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't be, it made me who I am. Who are you? I don't know anymore. I thought I did, but then you walked into my life, and everything I was sure about became uncertain. They stood there, his hands on her face, her hands somehow on his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart through expensive fabric. The city glittered below them. Inside the penthouse, inside this moment, the world narrowed to just them. Kiss me, Amara said. Di-hoon's eyes darkened. Are you sure? No, but I want you to anyway. He smiled, a real smile, not the corporate mask he wore for the world, and leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind, to pull back, to maintain the safe distance they'd kept for 3 years. She didn't. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, like they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. Then Amara's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened into something desperate and 3 years overdue. He tasted like wine and want, and the promise of things she'd stopped letting herself dream about. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Di-hoon rested his forehead against hers. I should go, he said, but he didn't move. You should, she agreed, also not moving. Before I do something we're not ready for. Probably wise. He kissed her again anyway, quick and sweet and full of promise. Then he forced himself to step back, to create space between them, to remember that they'd agreed to take this slow. Breakfast, he said, I'll be there. You'd better be. He left. Amara stood by the window long after he'd gone, touching her lips, feeling the ghost of him against her skin. Everything had changed. In one evening, in a handful of hours, the entire trajectory of her life had shifted. She should have been terrified, maybe she was, but underneath the fear was something else. Excitement, hope, the possibility that her marriage might become something worth having. Sleep found her eventually, and for the first time in 3 years, she didn't dream of escape. Morning came too early and not soon enough. Amara woke to find another note slipped under her door, 7 a.m., coffee's ready, DH. She smiled despite herself, got dressed, went to find her husband. He was in the kitchen, actually in the kitchen, not just passing through it, making eggs. The sight was so unexpected that she stopped in the doorway just to stare. Di-hoon Park, heir to a criminal empire, wearing a dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, cooking breakfast like a normal person. You cook, the words came out more surprised than she'd intended. He glanced over his shoulder, and the smile that crossed his face was warm and genuine. Badly, but I'm trying. The eggs were, in fact, slightly overdone. The toast was too dark on one side. The coffee was perfect, though 2 sugars, cream, and the effort mattered more than the execution. They ate at the island, sitting side by side instead of across from each other, close enough that their knees touched, small intimacies that felt revolutionary. What's on your schedule today? Di-hoon asked. Hospital in the afternoon. There's a new patient, a little girl with leukemia. I said I'd stop by. Can I come with you? The question surprised her. To the hospital. If you'll let me, I'd like to see this part of your life, the part that matters. Something warm spread through her chest. Okay, but you'll probably end up playing a lot of Uno. I think I can handle that. They spent the morning together, reading in the same room, her working on correspondence while he made phone calls, existing in each other's orbit in a way that felt natural and easy. Around noon, they drove to the hospital together, his hand resting on her knee the entire way there. The children's ward was bright and cheerful in that aggressive way hospitals use to combat the reality of why people are there. Amara waved to the nurses who knew her by name, led Di-hoon to the playroom where several kids were gathered. Marcus saw her first. His face lit up despite the exhaustion evident in every line of his small body. Amara, you came. Of course I did. I brought someone I want you to meet. She gestured to Di-hoon, who looked completely out of his element, surrounded by sick children and bright plastic toys. This is my husband, Di-hoon. Are you a prince? Marcus asked with the blunt curiosity of childhood. Di-hoon crouched down to the boy's level. Not quite, but I know your friend here is pretty special, so I wanted to meet the kids who make her smile. She smiles a lot when she's here, Marcus said seriously. Does she smile at home? The question was innocent, but it hit like a punch. Di-hoon's eyes found Amara's across the room. Not as much as she should, but I'm working on changing that. They stayed for hours, played games, read stories, helped with art projects. Amara watched Di-hoon, this man who'd ordered executions and negotiated with criminals, help a 6-year-old girl paint a butterfly. He was patient, gentle, nothing like the cold Heir she'd married. On the drive home, he was quiet, processing. "You okay?" Amara asked. "Those kids, they're dying. Most of them, yes. And you spend time with them knowing that. Especially knowing that. They need people who'll treat them like kids instead of patients, who'll play games and tell jokes and not look at them like they're already gone." Di-hoon's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I don't know how you do it, how you care that much knowing it's going to hurt. Because the alternative is worse. Not caring, not connecting, keeping everyone at distance so you won't feel the loss." She stopped, realizing what she'd said. "Oh." Yeah, his voice was rough. "Oh." They rode in silence for a while, then Di-hoon spoke again. "I'm going to bring them in." "Who?" "To the meetings, starting tomorrow. Small ones first, nothing that would put you in immediate danger. Let you observe, learn the business, figure out where you fit." Amara's heart kicked against her ribs. "Really? You were right, you're wasted as decoration. And if we're doing this, building something real, then you need to see all of me, even the ugly parts. Especially the ugly parts." He pulled the car over. Right there on the side of the road, no warning, just a sudden need to stop moving. Turned to face her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I'm falling in love with you," he said. "Maybe I already have. Maybe I was the moment I saw that photo and decided I needed to know the woman behind the resignation. But I need you to understand what that means in my world. It makes you valuable to people who want to hurt me. It makes you powerful and vulnerable at the same time. And I'm terrified that letting you in is going to get you killed." Amara unbuckled her seatbelt, leaned across the center console, and kissed him. Hard and certain and full of conviction. When she pulled back, her voice was steady. "Let me worry about me. You just focus on not shutting me out again." "Deal." They made it home, and barely through the door before his hands were in her hair and her back was against the wall, and 3 years of denied want came crashing down between them. Clothes hit the floor. They made it as far as the couch before giving up on the idea of separate bedrooms entirely. Afterward, tangled together in sheets that smelled like both of them, Amara traced patterns on his chest. So that was worth waiting 3 years for. Di-hoon's laugh was warm against her hair. "Yeah, though I vote we don't wait another 3 years before doing it again." "Seconded." They fell asleep like that, connected, present, existing in the same space without fear or distance. For the first time in 3 years, Amara felt like someone's wife instead of someone's strategic acquisition. She should have known it wouldn't last. 3 weeks into their new normal, breakfast together, dinners where they actually talked, nights where he'd knock and she'd answer, and they'd build something that felt like a real marriage, everything shifted. Di-hoon brought her to her first meeting like he'd promised. Small, he'd said, just a few trusted associates discussing logistics for a shipment. She sat in the corner, observing, learning the language of the business, how they talked around violence, how money moved through shell corporations, how power functioned in a world without rules. It was fascinating and horrifying in equal measure. After the meeting, one of the associates, a man named Chen, approached her. "Mrs. Park, a pleasure to finally meet you properly." "Mr. Chen," she shook his hand, aware of Di-hoon watching from across the room. "Your husband tells me you're interested in the business. That's unusual. I prefer to think of it as practical." "Indeed," Chen's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We could use someone with your particular skills. The shipping connections, especially. There's a route through Southeast Asia we've been trying to establish. Your father's company has the infrastructure." Amara felt Di-hoon tense even from 20 feet away. This was a test. She knew it. Chen knew it. Everyone in the room knew it. She could play it safe, defer to her husband, remain the decorative wife. Or she could do what she demanded, be an active participant. "I'll need to see the full logistics," she said. "Routes, timing, what you're actually moving. I won't use my father's company for human trafficking or weapons. The room went silent. Nobody talked to Chen like that. Nobody set conditions on the Park family business. Nobody except, apparently, the heir's wife. Chen's eyebrows rose. You have principles. I have boundaries. There's a difference. And if we can't agree to your boundaries, then you find another route. She met his gaze without flinching. I'm offering access to one of the most efficient shipping networks in Asia. That has value. Value comes with terms. A slow smile spread across Chen's face. I can see why you married her, he said to Di-hoon. She's got spine. She's got more than that, Di-hoon said, moving to stand beside her. His hand found her lower back, support, not control. We'll send over the proposal. You review it, make your determination. We move forward together or not at all. The message was clear. She wasn't just an add-on. She was a partner, equal authority, equal say. Chen left. The room slowly emptied. When they were alone, Di-hoon pulled her into his arms. That was incredible. I thought you might be angry that I overstepped. Are you kidding? You just negotiated with one of the most dangerous men in our organization and came out on top. You set boundaries and made him respect them. That's exactly what I hoped you'd do. Amara let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. It felt good, scary, but good. Welcome to the family business. Over the following weeks, Amara carved out her role. She reviewed contracts, attended meetings, used her father's legitimate connections to create new revenue streams that didn't require bloodshed. She was good at it. Better than good, she was transforming parts of the Park empire from violent necessity to profitable enterprise. Di-hoon's father noticed. The summons came on a Tuesday, dinner at the Park family estate, mandatory attendance. Amara had met Mr. Park exactly 3 times in 3 years, the engagement, the wedding, and one disastrous holiday dinner where she'd been introduced as the American girl, like she was an acquisition rather than a person. He wants to talk about your role, Di-hoon said, tension evident in every line of his body. About the changes you've been making. Is that bad? With my father, everything is either an opportunity or a threat, sometimes both. The estate was exactly as Amara remembered, cold, imposing, designed to make visitors feel small. Mr. Park waited in the dining room, a man who looked like an older, harder version of his son. All the ice, none of the vulnerability she'd discovered beneath Di-hoon's surface. Amara, sit, not a request, never a request with men like him. She sat, Di-hoon beside her, close enough that their knees touched under the table, united front. I've been hearing interesting things about you, Mr. Park said, that you're not content being a wife, that you want power. I want purpose, Amara corrected. There's a difference. Is there? His eyes were sharp, assessing. Power, purpose, control, they're all the same thing in this world. The question is whether you're strong enough to hold on to it. I guess we'll find out. A smile ghosted across Mr. Park's lips, not warm, but something close to approval. You're not what I expected when my son said he wanted to marry you. What did you expect? A pretty face, someone who'd smile at events and stay quiet otherwise, someone manageable. He leaned back in his chair, studying her like she was a problem to solve. Instead, you've spent 3 weeks restructuring our operations, establishing new protocols, making demands about what we will and won't engage in. You're either very brave or very stupid. Or very tired of being underestimated, Amara said evenly. Di-hoon's hand found hers under the table, squeezed, support and warning at the same time, don't push too hard. But Amara was done being careful, done being decorative. If Mr. Park wanted to threaten her, he could do it directly instead of dancing around it. You wanted me to marry your son for my father's connections, she continued. For legitimacy and access, I'm giving you that, but on my terms. You get the benefit of the Kingsley name, and I get to ensure we're building something sustainable instead of just violent. Sustainable doesn't pay as well as violent. Doesn't it? The legitimate shipping routes I've established will generate more revenue over the next 5 years than a dozen drug runs, with none of the risk, no law enforcement, no rival families fighting over territory, just profit. Mr. Park was quiet for a long moment, calculating, running numbers in his head. Finally, continue what you're doing, but understand that the moment your idealism becomes a liability, it ends. This is still my empire. For now, Amara said quietly. The air in the room changed, became dangerous. Di-hoon's grip on her hand tightened to the point of pain. You didn't challenge Mr. Park's authority, not if you wanted to keep breathing. But Mr. Park just laughed, actually laughed. I like her, he said to Di-hoon. She's got fire, keep her close. She'll either save this family or destroy it. Or both, Di-hoon said. Or both. Dinner was tense but civil. They left with Mr. Park's blessing to continue her work, which felt less like approval and more like he was giving her enough rope to hang herself. On the drive home, Di-hoon was quiet. You took a huge risk, he said finally. I know. He could have killed you for that, for no comment. But he didn't. Amara. I'm not going to live in fear of your father or anyone else. She turned to face him. If we're doing this, if we're building a life together, then I need you to trust that I can handle myself, that I'm strong enough for this world. I know you are. That's not what scares me. Then what does? He pulled the car over again, seemed to be making a habit of that, turned to face her with an expression that was equal parts love and terror. That you're too strong, that you'll realize you don't need me at all. The confession hung between them. Amara reached over, cupped his face in her hands. I don't need you, I choose you, there's a difference. Is there? Need is dependency, choice is power. I'm choosing to build this life with you, to love you, to be your partner, not because I have to, but because I want to. He kissed her then, desperate and deep, and she tasted the fear and love and possessiveness that drove him. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. If you ever want to leave, I'll tell you I won't run, I won't disappear, I'll sit down and we'll talk like adults. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. But right now, I'm not going anywhere. Promise. Promise. They made it home, made love like they were trying to prove something to each other, fell asleep tangled together, and Amara thought maybe this was it. Maybe they'd figured it out. Maybe the hard part was over. She should have known better. The next evening, Di-hoon came home late. Not unusual, the business ran on its own schedule, but something was off. She could see it in the tension in his shoulders, the way he poured himself a drink before even greeting her. What's wrong? Amara asked. We have a problem. He downed the whiskey in one go. Minyi Kwan wants a meeting. The name meant nothing to her. Who? Rival boss, runs the Southern Territory. We've had an uneasy truce for years, but he's been expanding, making moves into our operations. Di-hoon set down his glass, ran a hand through his hair. He specifically requested that you be there. Why me? That's what worries me. The meeting was set for the next evening at Neutral Ground, a restaurant owned by neither family, with strict no-weapons protocols enforced by private security. Amara dressed carefully, armor disguised as elegance. Di-hoon was tense beside her the entire drive there, his hand gripping hers too tight. Whatever he offers you, whatever he says, remember who you're leaving with, he said. You. Me. The restaurant was upscale and empty except for security and the two parties meeting. Minyi Kwan sat at the center table, young, attractive, dangerous in a way that was different from Di-hoon. Where her husband was ice, Minyi was fire, controlled burn instead of frozen tundra. Mrs. Park, he stood as they approached, offered his hand. Thank you for coming. Amara shook it, aware of Di-hoon practically vibrating with tension beside her. They sat. Minyi dismissed his own security to the perimeter, leaving just the three of them at the table. I've been hearing interesting things about you, Minyi said, that you're transforming the park operations, making them legitimate, profitable without the violence. Is that a problem? Amara asked. On the contrary, it's impressive, which is why I wanted to meet you. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. I have a proposition. We're not interested, Di-hoon said immediately. You haven't heard it yet. Minyi's eyes never left Amara's. What if I told you that you could have everything you want? Power, authority, a real role in running an empire, not just implementing changes, but actually leading. I'm already doing that. Are you, or are you making suggestions that your husband's father can veto at any time? How long before Mr. Park decides your idealism is inconvenient? Before he removes you from the equation entirely? The words hit harder than they should have, because he was right. Her position was dependent on Mr. Park's continued tolerance. The moment she became more liability than asset, she was gone. What are you offering? She asked, ignoring Di-hoon's sharp intake of breath beside her. Partnership, real partnership. Divorce Park, marry into my family, and we build something new together. Legitimate operations with the infrastructure to protect them. You'd have equal authority, equal say, no father hovering over every decision, no husband who spent 3 years treating you like property before suddenly deciding you mattered. If you're loving this tension, drop a comment telling me whose offer you'd take, and make sure you're subscribed. This story isn't over yet. The offer hung in the air like a grenade. Amara felt Di-hoon's hand clench into a fist on the table, saw the muscle jumping in his jaw, knew that if they weren't in neutral ground with strict protocols, Minyi would already be dead. You've done your research, she said carefully. I make it a point to know my opportunities, and you, Amara Kingsley Park, are the biggest opportunity to cross my path in years. Minyi smiled, charming, calculating. Think about it. No more fighting for scraps of authority, no more wondering if your husband's father will decide you're expendable, just power, pure and simple. She's not interested, Di-hoon said through gritted teeth. Let her speak for herself. Minyi's gaze stayed fixed on Amara. You've spent your whole life being told what to do. Your father married you off. Your husband ignored you. Even now, making your big moves, you're still operating within someone else's framework. Don't you want something that's actually yours? The question landed because it was true. Everything Amara had achieved in the last few weeks existed at the pleasure of men who could take it away at any moment. Her marriage, her role, her power, all of it was conditional, borrowed, revocable. I need to think about it, she said. Di-hoon's head whipped toward her. Amara. I said I need to think about it. She met Minyi's eyes. You're right that my position is precarious, but you're wrong if you think I trust you more than I trust my husband. I don't know you. I don't know what your real agenda is, and I'm not making a decision this big without considering all the angles. Fair enough. Minyi pulled out a card, slid it across the table. Call me when you decide. The offer stands for 72 hours. After that, the opportunity closes. He stood, nodded to both of them, and left with his security detail. Amara and Di-hoon sat in silence for a long moment. The restaurant felt cavernous around them. Finally, Di-hoon spoke. Tell me you're not actually considering this. I'm considering everything. That's what smart people do when they're presented with options. He's trying to manipulate you. Obviously, but that doesn't mean he's wrong about my position being unstable. Di-hoon turned to face her fully. What do you want me to say? That I can guarantee my father won't turn on you? I can't. You know I can't. He's unpredictable and dangerous, and he only cares about power. But that doesn't mean the solution is to run to another crime lord who's probably worse. How do you know he's worse? Because I know Minyi. He doesn't make offers like this out of generosity. He wants something, and once he has it, you become disposable. And I'm not disposable to your family. The question was cruel, she knew it was, but it needed to be asked. Di-hoon looked like she'd slapped him. You're not disposable to me. But I am to your father, and eventually you'll have to choose between us. What happens when you do? I choose you. Can you, really? When it comes down to it, when choosing me means losing everything you've built, everything you're supposed to inherit, will you actually choose me? Di-hoon stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I already have. Every day for the last month, I've been choosing you, bringing you into meetings, supporting your decisions, standing with you against people who think you should know your place. What more do you want from me? I want to know that if your father decides I'm a threat, you won't let him kill me. The words came out quiet but certain, the fear she'd been carrying since Mr. Park's dinner laid bare. Di-hoon's expression shattered. You think I would let him hurt you? I think you're his son. I think loyalty runs deep in your world. I think when push comes to shove, family might matter more than a wife you've known for 3 years. Amara, he crossed to her, pulled her to her feet, held her face between his hands. Listen to me. If anyone tries to hurt you, I will burn down everything I've ever built to keep you safe. The empire, the family, all of it, you matter more. You can't know that until you're tested. Then let me prove it. His voice was desperate now, raw. Don't take Minyi's offer. Don't run to someone else because you're afraid. Stay, fight. Let me show you that I mean what I say. Amara wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But trust wasn't built on words. It was built on actions, on proof, on watching someone choose you over and over until you finally believed they would never stop choosing you. I need time, she said. How much time? Minyi gave me 72 hours. I'll give you the same. And then what? Then I decide. She pulled out of his grip, stepped back. I decide whether I trust you enough to bet my life on it, whether the marriage we've built in the last month is real enough to survive your father deciding I'm inconvenient, whether love is actually stronger than power in a world where power is everything. Amara, please. Take me home. The drive was silent, tense, full of all the things they weren't saying. When they reached the penthouse, Amara went straight to her room, her original room, the one she'd slept in alone for 3 years before everything changed. Di-hoon stood in the doorway, looking lost. Don't shut me out. I'm thinking, that's different. It doesn't feel different. I know, she softened slightly, seeing the genuine fear in his eyes. But I need space to figure out what I actually want versus what I think I should want. You understand that, right? He nodded slowly, reluctantly. 72 hours. 72 hours. He left, closed the door. Amara sat on the edge of her bed and let out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in her chest for hours. Minyi's card sat in her purse, his offer repeated in her head. Power, authority, independence, everything she'd been fighting for handed to her on a silver platter. All she had to do was walk away from her husband, from the life they'd started building, from the possibility that love might actually be enough. But was love enough when you were surrounded by people who'd kill you without hesitation? When your father-in-law saw you as either an asset or a threat? When your entire existence depended on the goodwill of men who didn't believe in goodwill? Amara pulled out her phone, stared at it for a long time, then she dialed. Amara, her father's voice was surprised. They hadn't spoken since before the wedding. Is everything all right? I need advice. The words came out harder than she'd expected. You married me off to the Parks for protection, to secure your business. Did you ever think about what it would cost me? Silence on the other end. Then, every day, but I didn't see another option. Without their protection, we would have been destroyed. So you sacrificed me. I made a choice I'm not proud of, but yes, I sacrificed your happiness for the family's survival. At least he was honest. If you had to do it again, would you? Yes, but I'd also tell you I was sorry, that I wished I was strong enough to find another way, that losing your respect was the price I paid for keeping you alive. I might have preferred to take my chances. I know, but parents don't always give their children the choice. We make the calls we think we have to make and hope they'll forgive us eventually. Amara closed her eyes. Someone else offered me a way out. Power, independence, everything I've been fighting for. All I have to do is leave Di-hoon. Her father was quiet for a long moment. Do you love him? I think so, maybe. I don't know. How do you know when it's real? When the thought of losing them hurts more than the fear of being hurt. His voice was gentle, understanding, when you'd rather risk everything than lose them entirely. Even if risking everything might get you killed. Especially then, that's when you know it matters. They talked for another hour, about choices and consequences and the impossible calculations you make when every option costs something. By the time they hung up, Amara didn't have answers, but she had clarity. She knew what she wanted. The question was whether she was brave enough to reach for it. The next morning, Di-hoon was in the kitchen again, making coffee, 2 sugars, cream, like he had every day since they'd started over. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept. When he saw her, his expression flickered between hope and fear. "Morning," he said carefully. "Morning." She took the coffee he offered, let the warmth seep into her hands. "I'm not taking Minyi's offer." The relief that washed across his face was visceral. Thank God. "But I'm not done talking." She set down the cup, met his eyes directly. "If we're doing this, if I'm staying, if we're building something real, then I need more than promises. I need action." "What kind of action?" "I want equal partnership officially recognized. My name on the papers. My authority acknowledged by your family and associates. Not just permission to attend meetings, but actual power to make decisions." "Done." "I want your father to understand that if he touches me, he loses you. That I'm not some side piece he can eliminate when convenient. That choosing me over him is a line you'll actually cross." Di-hoon's jaw set. "I'll tell him today." "And I want out." The words came out firm, final, not out of the marriage, out of the criminal parts of the business. "You want to go legitimate? Let's actually do it. Let's build something that doesn't require anyone to die. Transform the entire operation. It'll take years, but if you're serious about changing, about being different from your father, then prove it." The request was huge, potentially impossible. Asking him to dismantle the empire his grandfather built, his father expanded, that he was supposed to inherit. But Amara was done compromising, done accepting scraps. If she was going to bet her life on this marriage, then the marriage needed to be worth the bet. Di-hoon was quiet for a long time, thinking, calculating. Finally, "It'll destroy my relationship with my father. I know. It might start a war with the families who depend on the current system. I know. I might lose everything." "Not everything, you'll have me." He looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression, decision crystallizing into determination. "Okay. Okay. Let's go legitimate. Let's build something better. Let's prove that you can be powerful without being violent, that love isn't weakness, that my father's way isn't the only way." He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. "Let's burn it all down and build something new from the ashes." Amara's breath caught. "You're serious?" "Completely. I want you more than I want the empire. I want a future with you more than I want my father's approval. And if that makes me weak in his eyes, then I'll be weak. As long as I'm yours." She kissed him then, deep and certain and full of the choice she'd made. Not because she needed him, but because she wanted him. Because she decided he was worth the risk, worth the fight, worth everything that came next. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Di-hoon rested his forehead against hers. "We should probably have a plan for telling my father, for managing the transition, for surviving what comes next." "We will, but right now," she pulled him toward the bedroom. "Right now, I just want to be with my husband." They made love slowly, deliberately, like they were sealing a promise with their bodies, choosing each other, choosing this future, choosing to believe that love could survive in a world designed to kill it. Afterward, tangled together in sheets, Amara's phone buzzed. Text from Minyi, "Time's almost up. What's your decision?" She deleted it without responding. Her decision was made. Minyi would figure it out when the 72 hours expired and she didn't call. "We should probably get dressed," Di-hoon said, though he made no move to actually get up. "Lots to do, empires to dismantle, fathers to disappoint." 5 more minutes. 5 more minutes. They stayed there, wrapped in each other, building courage for what came next, because confronting Mr. Park would be dangerous. Going legitimate would cost them allies, money, power. They were choosing the hardest possible path. But they were choosing it together. That afternoon, they walked into Mr. Park's office hand in hand, united front, ready for war. He was behind his desk, reviewing documents, and didn't look up immediately. Power move, making them wait. When he finally acknowledged their presence, his expression was unreadable. Di-hoon, Amara, this is unexpected. We need to talk, Di-hoon said. Clearly, Mr. Park set down his papers, leaned back in his chair. About what? About the future of this family, about the direction of the business, about Amara's role. Di-hoon's hand tightened on hers, and about the fact that if you ever threaten her, harm her, or attempt to remove her from the equation, you lose me entirely. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees. Mr. Park's eyes narrowed. Excuse me. You heard him, Amara said. I'm not a pawn, I'm not expendable, and I'm not going anywhere. So you can accept that your son has chosen a partner who challenges the way you've always done things, or you can lose your heir, your choice. Nobody spoke to Mr. Park that way. The silence stretched out, dangerous and thick. Di-hoon's father looked between them, calculating odds, measuring threats, deciding whether this was a battle worth fighting. You'd choose her over family, he asked his son. In a heartbeat. Even knowing what that costs. Especially knowing what it costs. Di-hoon stepped forward, never releasing Amara's hand. You taught me that power is everything, that weakness gets you killed, but you were wrong about what weakness is. Weakness isn't loving someone, it's being so afraid of loss that you never risk having anything worth losing in the first place. Mr. Park's jaw clenched. For a moment, Amara thought he might actually explode. Then something unexpected happened. He laughed. Not warm, not kind, but genuine. You sound like your mother, he said quietly. Di-hoon stiffened. What? Before she died, she used to challenge me like this, tell me I was wrong, push back against my decisions. Mr. Park's expression was distant, remembering, I hated it, and I loved her for it. She made me better than I wanted to be. The confession hung in the air. Amara had never heard Di-hoon mention his mother, had assumed she'd been another casualty of this world, killed by rivals or disease or the simple grinding machinery of violence. She left, Mr. Park continued, took you and disappeared when you were 8, said she couldn't watch me turn our son into a monster. I found her 6 months later. She died in the firefight. We used to retrieve you. Horror washed over Amara. Di-hoon stood frozen beside her, his grip on her hand almost painful. You never told me that, he said hoarsely. I told you she died. The details seemed unnecessary. Mr. Park's voice was flat, emotionless in that way that suggested too much emotion buried beneath. She was right, though. I did turn you into a monster, or tried to. Apparently I failed, since you're standing here threatening to throw everything away for a woman you barely know. I know her better than I've ever known anyone, and she knows me, the real me, not the heir you tried to create. Mr. Park studied them both for a long moment. Then he opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, and slid it across the desk. Minyi's offer, I've known about it since before he approached you, had him followed when he requested the meeting. Amara's stomach dropped. You knew. I know everything that happens in my territory, including when rival bosses try to poach my son's wife. He tapped the folder. This contains enough information to destroy Minyi's operation. Shipping routes, financial records, connections to law enforcement, everything you'd need to take him down completely. Why are you giving this to us? Di-hoon asked. Because she didn't take his offer. Mr. Park's eyes found Amara's. She chose you, chose this family, even knowing how dangerous we are. That kind of loyalty is rare, valuable, worth protecting. I didn't choose loyalty to you, Amara said. I chose love. There's a difference. Is there in this world? Love and loyalty are the same thing. They both get you killed if you're not careful. He stood, walked around the desk. You want equal partnership, official recognition? You have it. I'll announce it at the next family meeting. But understand that protection goes both ways. You defend this family as fiercely as you defend my son. From external threats, yes, from itself, Amara met his gaze without flinching. We're going legitimate, transforming the operations, building something that doesn't require violence. That's not possible. Watch us, Di-hoon's voice was steel. We're doing this with or without your support, but it would be easier with it. Mr. Park was quiet for a long time, thinking, finally, you have 5 years. 5 years to prove you can make legitimate operations as profitable as the current system. If you succeed, I'll step back, let you run things your way. If you fail, we go back to business as usual. And if we refuse that timeline, Amara asked, then I oppose you, and trust me when I say you don't want me as an enemy. But there was something in his voice, not quite respect, but close to it. 5 years, show me I'm wrong about violence being the only language that matters. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't everything they wanted, but it was a chance, an opening, more than Amara had expected when they'd walked into this office. Deal, Di-hoon said. They left with the folder, with Mr. Park's grudging acceptance, with 5 years to transform an empire. On the drive home, neither of them spoke. Too much had happened, too many revelations, too many emotions to process. Your mother, Amara said finally, I'm sorry. I didn't know, he told me she died in an accident. I never knew she'd tried to save me from this life. Di-hoon's voice was rough with unshed emotion. She died because of me. She died because your father wouldn't let her go. That's on him, not you. Still, Amara reached over, laced her fingers through his. We'll do better. When we have kids, if we have kids, we'll give them choices, options, freedom to be something other than heirs to an empire. Kids, Di-hoon glanced at her, surprise evident in his expression. You're thinking about kids. Eventually, maybe, if we survive the next 5 years. A smile ghosted across his lips. 5 years to go legitimate, 5 years to prove love isn't weakness, 5 years to build something better. No pressure. None at all. They spent the evening strategizing, called in financial advisors, lawyers, people they trusted, started mapping out the transformation, which operations could be made legal, which needed to be shut down, how to manage the transition without losing everything in the process. It was overwhelming, exhausting, possibly impossible. But they were doing it together. Around midnight, Amara's phone buzzed again. Minyi, 72 hours are up. I assume your silence is your answer. A shame, we could have built something extraordinary. She showed the text to Di-hoon. Should we be worried about retaliation? Probably. Minyi doesn't handle rejection well. He pulled up the information his father had given them, shipping routes, financial records, everything they needed to neutralize the threat. But we have insurance now. He moves against us, we destroy him. Violence for violence, that's the old way. Sometimes the old way is necessary to survive long enough to build the new way. It wasn't the answer Amara wanted, but she understood it. Change didn't happen overnight, and they were dealing with people who only understood power. Until they'd fully transformed the empire, they had to play by the old rules while building new ones. The next months were brutal. Long days, longer nights, constant pushing against people who resisted every change, associates who walked away, rivals who saw the transition as weakness and tested their boundaries, law enforcement who didn't trust the sudden legitimacy. Through it all, Amara and Di-hoon stood together. When she was exhausted, he carried the load. When he doubted, she reminded him why they were doing this. They learned to read each other, to anticipate needs, to function as a single unit instead of 2 separate people trying to coordinate. 6 months in, they converted their first major operation. A drug distribution network became a pharmaceutical supply chain, legal, profitable, sustainable. The success attracted attention, other families interested in going legitimate, young heirs tired of the violence, even some old guard bosses who'd been looking for an exit strategy. 1 year in, 3 more operations had transitioned. Revenue was down initially, but stabilizing. Mr. Park attended every quarterly review, watching, calculating, waiting for them to fail. They didn't. 18 months in, Amara discovered she was pregnant. The revelation changed everything and nothing. Di-hoon became even more protective, but also more determined. This wasn't just about them anymore, it was about the life they were bringing into the world. The future they were building for a child who deserved better than the violence that had defined their own lives. Boy or girl? Di-hoon asked, his hand on her still flat stomach. Does it matter? No, but I'm curious. Girl, Amara said, I can feel it. How? Maternal instinct. She was right. The ultrasound confirmed it 3 months later. A daughter, healthy, perfect, terrifying. 2 years in, Minyi made his move. Not directly, he was too smart for that. But a rival family suddenly had access to Park family security protocols. Shipments were hijacked. Associates turned. It was subtle, coordinated, designed to look like simple bad luck until you saw the pattern. Di-hoon saw it immediately. It's Minyi, has to be. They pulled out the insurance, all the information Mr. Park had given them, started dismantling Minyi's operation piece by piece, not violently but legally, tax audits, police investigations, everything by the book, proving they could fight without bloodshed. Minyi responded with one last desperate move, a direct threat, back off or the pregnant wife has an accident. The message came through a burner phone, untraceable, delivered with the kind of casual menace that suggested he absolutely would follow through. Amara was 7 months pregnant, visibly showing, vulnerable in ways she'd never been before. We end this, Di-hoon said. His voice was cold, dead, the heir his father had created, emerging when threatened, tonight, permanently. No, Amara grabbed his arm. We don't kill him, that's the old way. We are better than that. He threatened our daughter. And if we kill him, we prove we are no different than everyone else, that all this work, all this change, was just performance. She met his eyes, saw the rage and fear warring there. Trust me, trust that we can handle this without becoming what we are trying to escape. It took everything Di-hoon had to stand down, to let Amara handle it her way. But he did, because he trusted her, because she'd earned it. Amara called Minyi directly. Meet me, just us, tomorrow. Why would I do that? Because I'm giving you a choice. Walk away now, and we destroy you slowly through legal channels. Keep pushing, and we give everything we have to law enforcement. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison, or you take the third option. Which is? Partnership. You want to go legitimate? We help you. You've got the infrastructure, we've got the knowledge. We turn your operation into something sustainable. Everyone wins. The silence on the other end was long, calculating. Finally, why would you help me after I threatened you? Because killing you accomplishes nothing, but transforming your empire proves that change is possible for anyone, that violence isn't inevitable. That's worth more to me than revenge. They met the next day, same restaurant where Minyi had first made his offer, same table, different outcome. You're serious, he said, studying her, about the partnership. Completely. We've spent 2 years proving it works. You've spent 2 years watching from the outside, seeing the profits, knowing it's possible. Stop fighting us and join us. And if I agree, then we combine resources, share knowledge, build something that doesn't require our children to grow up in a world where violence is the only language that matters. She placed a hand on her stomach. My daughter deserves better, so does yours, if you ever want one. Minyi was quiet for a long time, then he extended his hand. Partnership. Amara shook it, felt the weight of it, the gamble, the trust, the possibility that she'd just made a friend out of an enemy or given a threat more ammunition. Time would tell. 3 years in, the transformation was undeniable. Profits exceeded the old system. Violence was down 90%. Associates who'd initially resisted were now advocating for the changes. Even Mr. Park, grudging, skeptical Mr. Park, admitted they'd exceeded his expectations. You proved me wrong, he said at one quarterly review. I didn't think it was possible. So we have your support, Di-hoon asked. Full support. You have my respect, which is harder to earn. Mr. Park stood, addressed the room full of family associates. My son and his wife have built something remarkable, sustainable, powerful. From this point forward, they lead this family. I'm stepping back. The announcement sent shockwaves through the organization. No one had expected Mr. Park to actually relinquish control, but he did. Because Amara and Di-hoon had done the impossible, they'd proven that love and power could coexist, that change was possible even in the darkest places. 4 years in, their daughter was born. Minjai Park came into the world screaming and perfect, and Amara cried holding her because this was what everything had been for. This small life, this chance to build a better world, this proof that hope existed even in darkness. Di-hoon held them both, his wife and his daughter, and Amara saw tears tracking down his face. "We did it," he whispered. "We actually did it." "We're not done yet," she reminded him. "One more year to make it 5. One more year, then we've proven we can sustain it." 5 years in, they hosted a celebration. Every family that had joined their transformation, every associate who'd believed in the possibility of change, every person who'd risked everything to build something better. The room was full of people who'd chosen hope over violence. Mr. Park stood to give a toast. "5 years ago, my son told me love wasn't weakness. I didn't believe him. I thought attachment would get him killed. Instead, it saved him, saved all of us." He raised his glass to Amara, to the woman who refused to be property, who demanded better from all of us, who proved an old man wrong about everything he thought he knew about power. The room erupted in applause. Amara held Minjai, accepted congratulations, felt Di-hoon's arm around her waist. This was success. This was what winning looked like, not dominance, not control, but transformation, building something sustainable out of ashes. Later that night, after everyone had left, after Minjai was asleep, Amara and Di-hoon stood on their balcony overlooking the city. The same balcony where she'd taken her coffee alone for 3 years, where she'd felt the weight of her loneliness, where she'd wondered if things would ever change. "5 years ago, I was sitting on a date with another man," she said, "and you interrupted. Best decision I ever made, even if I handled it terribly." "You did handle it terribly, possessive, controlling, completely inappropriate. And yet it worked out. Against all odds." She leaned into him, felt his warmth, his solidity, the reality of him. "Do you regret it, any of it?" "Not a single moment. Even the painful parts brought us here." He kissed the top of her head. "What about you?" "I regret the 3 years we wasted, but everything after." She turned in his arms, met his eyes. "I'd do it all again, every fight, every risk, every impossible decision, because it led to this. To us. To us." They stood there as the city lights flickered below, as their daughter slept peacefully inside, as the empire they'd built together hummed along, making money and minimizing violence. It wasn't perfect. There were still threats, still challenges, still moments when the old ways tried to resurface. But they faced it together, partners, equals, proof that love could survive even in the darkest places if you were brave enough to fight for it. "What's next?" Di-hoon asked. "World domination," Amara suggested, "but the legitimate kind. Obviously." "Expanding the model, helping other families transform, building a network of legitimate operations that makes the old way obsolete." "Ambitious. We've never been anything else." He laughed, and it was warm and genuine and completely different from the cold Heir she'd married 5 years ago. They'd both changed, been changed by each other, by the work, by the choice to build something better. "I love you," he said, "in case I haven't mentioned it recently." "You mention it constantly, but I don't mind hearing it again." "I love you, Amara Park. You infuriate me and challenge me and make me better than I ever thought I could be. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, even when I was too stupid to realize it." "Good answer." She kissed him, soft and certain. "I love you too, even when you're overprotective and controlling and trying to make decisions without consulting me." "I'm working on that." I know, keep working. They went inside, checked on Minjai one more time. She was still sleeping, peaceful and perfect. Then went to their bedroom. Not separate rooms anymore. One room, one bed, one life they'd built together from fragments and determination. In the morning, there would be more work, more challenges, more people trying to pull them back to the old ways. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, they had this, each other, their daughter, the empire they'd transformed, the love they'd fought for. Sometimes the greatest power isn't control, it's choosing who to trust, who to love, who to build a future with. Amara had chosen Di-hoon, he'd chosen her. Together, they'd chosen something better. And that made all the difference. If you want to see more stories about women who refuse to be controlled, who demand better, who transform darkness into light, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment telling me what you think Amara and Di-hoon's biggest challenge will be in year 6. And smash that like button if you believe love and power can coexist, that choosing someone doesn't make you weak, it makes you unstoppable. Because in a world that tells you to accept what you're given, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is demand more. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.